Malcolm X, the most influential human rights activist in history. His early life was shaped by trauma, racism, and forced separation. He was born in Malcolm Little in Omaha, Nebraska, and his father, a Garveyite preacher, was likely murdered by white supremacists. His mother, Louise Little, was of Afro-Caribbean and Scottish descent. She was institutionalized in 1939, after years of psychological abuse from the welfare system, leaving Malcolm and his siblings split up into foster care. Malcolm grew up in predominantly white towns, where racism was constant. He lived with multiple foster families, witnessing how black children were treated as inferior. In school, a teacher crushed his dreams of becoming a lawyer, saying it was not realistic for a Negro. Malcolm was a top student, but the sting of racism led him to drop out by 8th grade. He moved to Boston and later Harlem. Immersing himself in street life, he went by nicknames Detroit Red. He became involved in hustling, gambling, drug dealing, and theft. At age 20, he was arrested for burglary and sentenced to 10 years in prison. This was a punishment many felt it was excessive compared to white offenders for similar crimes. But prison became the turning point of his life. He educated himself through reading and sharpened his intellect. His siblings introduced the teachings of the Nation of Islam. He converted and rejected his slave name, Little, and adopted X, to represent his lost African ancestry. After his release in 1952, Malcolm X became the Nation of Islam's most powerful voice. He preached black pride, self-discipline, economic independence, and self-defense. His message of by any means necessary challenged the nonviolent strategies of the civil rights movement. He called out white supremacy without apology. Malcolm reconnected with his siblings, many of whom were active in the Nation of Islam. His brother Wilfred was a minister, and several others were members. Their support helped fuel his rise. Even after leaving the nation, some remained by his side as he transitioned to a broader human rights mission. Behind the revolutionary, he was a devoted husband and father. In 1958, Malcolm married Betty Shabazz, a nurse and fellow member of the Nation of Islam. Their relationship was grounded in shared values of discipline, faith, and purpose. Together, they had 6 daughters, 4 born before his death, and twin girls born after he was assassinated. Despite being a public figure under constant threat, he often kept his activism and family separate for their safety. But he spoke passionately about black family values and raising the next generation to be proud and fearless. But while his family grew, so did the tension with the Nation of Islam. Malcolm began questioning Elijah Muhammad's leadership, particularly after learning of the secret affairs that contradicted the nation's strict moral teachings. He also felt the organization wasn't doing enough to confront global oppression or build coalitions with other black movements. In March 1964, Malcolm officially broke away. He formed Muslim Mosque, and soon after, the Organization of Afro-American Unity, an internationalist group that aligned black struggles in the U.S. with global anti-colonial movements. That same year, Malcolm made a pilgrimage to Mecca, and everything changed. In Mecca, he saw Muslims of all races praying side by side. It challenged his previous views about race and inspired a global vision of unity. He embraced Sunni Islam, adopted the name El-Hajj Malik el-Shabazz, and rejected racial hatred in favor of solidarity across all oppressed peoples. He became a global Pan-Africanist, connecting black liberation to anti-colonial struggles worldwide. Malcolm traveled to Egypt, Ghana, Nigeria, and other African nations, meeting with revolutionary leaders. He aimed to take the U.S. before the United Nations for human rights violations against black Americans. But this global activism made him a greater threat in the eyes of his enemies. Malcolm was now being watched more closely than ever. The FBI, CIA, and NYPD all had files on him. He received constant death threats. On February 14, 1965, his home was firebombed, while his wife and children were inside. Just 1 week later, on February 21st, Malcolm X was assassinated while preparing to speak in Manhattan's Audubon Ballroom. His assassination remains controversial. While 3 Nation of Islam members were convicted, Later evidence showed FBI and NYPD involvement in undermining Malcolm. Two of the men were eventually exonerated decades later. Malcolm died in front of his wife and children. He was a symbol of truth, pride, and power. He challenged the world to see Black people as human beings, deserving of dignity, justice, and freedom.